Hey everyone, and welcome to Anesthesia Coffee Break with Lahir and Stan. And today we've got a really joyful session because it's about passing the exam. And we've got two great guests here, Penny and Alex. Thanks for being with us.
No problem.
And might get a bit of a background about with you guys, but essentially we'll just have a chat to each of you, find out what your experiences of the exam. We really want to focus on how the exam might have changed as well, like from when me and Stan sat decades ago to when you guys have sat now. And yeah, just to find out how it's changed and your experience and any other thoughts you had, because I think a lot of your experience will really help other trainees in this space, just to see what methods you took to passing and how you organize your life and everything else. So yeah, it would be great to chat to you guys. And then anyone in the audience who's got questions, just put it in the chat, and we'll just curate that and ask you guys anything that people want to know. So kick off with Alex, well, to tell us a bit about yourself and yeah, welcome and congrats.
Thanks very much. So I'm a WA-based trainee. So I'm a year into my training. Brisbane was my first attempt. And was just absolutely thrilled to get through. It was a pretty terrible year overall, so I'm glad to see the end of it. And I've got to thank both you two guys as well, Lahiro and Stan, for all your resources that you put out. I can still remember listening to your podcast like over a year ago when I first started looking at all the content and feeling really overwhelmed and watching some past videos. So yeah, thank you guys for all the stuff that you put out. It's really helpful.
Yeah, there's always someone putting, so like for us, it was probably like Kerry Brandis and a few other kind of people that passed on their notes. It's almost like it's always this pay it forward mentality, except now we've got so many avenues like YouTube and the internet and podcasting to be able to make it even more broad, I guess. What was the experience for you of organizing your study, how long you had to study for, just your method to get to a level of success? Like, did you have a plan with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I started my training halfway through the year. So I was an August starter. So for the first 6 months of that year, which was last year, I took some time off from work and I locumed for about 5 or 6 months. And towards about the 4.5, 5 month mark of locuming, I was getting quite bored and getting quite sort of like antsy and ready to start training. So I actually started just very briefly looking at a few things. So I think I started listening to Anaesthesia Coffee Break whilst taking the dog for a walk, and started flicking through a few textbooks like Wes, and signed up to Adrenaline Memories and started watching a few videos, and then sort of really started to ramp up after a few weeks into when training started. So I found the start of training really exhausting. I was coming home after work just absolutely exhausted from the cognitive load of it all and it being all really new because I hadn't done that much anaesthetics prior. So took probably a few weeks off before getting back into it again. And I used Stan's template timetable to guide my study. And because I'd already started a few, sort of like a month and a half beforehand, I was probably about 4 to 5 weeks already into that timetable. So I had a few weeks up my sleeve to settle into work. And then I used that timetable to guide the topics over the year. But I'm not going to lie, a few months out, I didn't stick to that timetable as well as I promised myself that I would. But in the end, it didn't really matter because I was quite flexible with my study, and I changed a few things as I went when I realized this isn't working, and changed my tactic a little bit more. And I also had a study group like throughout the entire process that changed a fair bit throughout the year as well.
Yeah. And you said things didn't quite work out. What were the things that you thought would work that didn't work with study?
I thought I would have been better to staying to a timetable, but I did find it really hard to balance working with sticking to that timetable, particularly when you've got to cover such a large amount of content on a particular topic in a week when you might be working, over 40 hours and coming home exhausted. So that's that's where I struggled. I struggled with balancing the balancing work with getting through like really large topics.
Yeah. How did you then solve that problem?
Well, so luckily I had a few weeks sort of redundancy built into that timetable. So I'd reorganized it. So I go, okay, well, this week or this weekend needs to be a big weekend, and I need to get through this and this. And so I would just shuffle. I had a blue tack to my study wall, and I would just shuffle things around, which was quite easy to do. And then it all just kind of fell into place. Luckily, yeah.
Actually, that's an interesting idea of having, instead of a timetable on an Excel spreadsheet, a calendar with movable color-coded pieces. So you go,
Yeah.
you can get around to that, better shove that in between other.
Yeah, so I would just circle something and just move it down like into that week and combine it with a topic that I thought, like maybe I'd just quickly flicked through some of that extra topic and gone, oh, that looks pretty doable in, a day or so. So I'll bring, this bigger topic onto that day and try and get through as much as I can there.
I remember the same experience of, I had my timetable completely shattered because of exactly what you said. It's hard to study effectively after working a 12-hour day. But then other weeks were amazing. I remember the weeks off from ICU, or the weeks on transport where all I was doing was I shouldn't say all I was doing. It was hard, but at least it was sitting there watching the MRI for ages and just making sure the patient wasn't desatting. But that was remarkably effective time as well. Did you have any moments where you're like, oh, wow, that was a useful week? Like, was there a particular style of work week that was particularly good for you that made you get more ahead?
Yeah. So if I was on the acute pain service at work for maybe 2 days in a row, usually you could sneak away and you could get some work done. So they were better weeks. So that was, if I looked ahead and I saw that I was on the acute pain service, I'd make sure I would definitely take stuff into work, and put and do the round as fast as possible, and then sneak away and try and get some work done.
Yeah, that's smart. Do you take 12 months? Is that the kind of time frame that you were prescribed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think personally, minimum 12 months. Yeah, minimum.
Yeah, good. Is there any part of this that was actually kind of enjoyable? Like, were there moments where you're just like, yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this. It is painful, but it's okay. I get to meet up with my mates in the study group.
Yeah, there was definitely that part of it. Particularly leading up to the vivas. I found preparing and studying for the vivas so much more enjoyable than the written. It was actually kind of fun, because you could put your examiner face on and semi-torture all these friends that you had, but in like a really nice way.
Yeah.
But then, there were definitely times studying for the written where there were just like interesting topics, and particularly the stuff that you use every day. I found more interesting, because then I would learn about something and then go into theatre and actually like see that concept being displayed in a patient. That was quite nice. And it was also, I don't know, maybe I probably shouldn't say this, but it was also interesting seeing how some of my bosses practice anesthesia, and then just thinking about how you study for the primary and you just sort of have a little internal monologue going, that doesn't really make doesn't really make sense based off what I'm studying for the primary, but I'll just keep my mouth shut. There are definitely a few good moments. Yeah.
I find it really cool how you'd go into work, and because everyone's done it before, first of all, people look at you with a bit of sympathy, so you get that point. But you've also, anesthetic training, so you're part of this club, and especially that moment when they ask you something and you know what you're talking about, and then I feel like there's a slow turning point where most anesthetic consultants have forgotten most of their physiology or pharmacology, and so when they ask you something at your later end, they actually look at you like you're the expert, because you're about to sit the exam, and respect or mutual.
I definitely had that imposter syndrome several times when people were like, "Oh, well, you know all of this because you're studying for the primary," and I would just have shifty eyes and go, "Yes, of course I know all about that."
I feel like even after we pass the primary exam, it's like, oh yeah, we know a very specific aspect of each of these things, but Did you ever? I just remember this moment when I was like, oh, so Mac awake is 0.3, Mac, Mac awake 99% confidence or like 0.7, but everyone's running everyone on one Mac. What's going on? And so, I started running people kind of lower, thinking that that was the right thing to do, but didn't realize that actually it's the art of anesthesia. Your muscle paralysis wears off and you're using your Mac to keep people from moving as well as keep them asleep. So it's like this thing of, even though the pure pharmacology aspect of it is one truth, the actual what your consultants do practice with is just, oh, this is the balance of all these things that just make my anesthetic work.
Yeah.
How did you form your study group? Well,
So thankfully, it kind of fell into place for us because obviously with the WA training program is quite small because it's one centralized hospital that you apply to. So the program's quite small, and it's even smaller for the people who start in August. So most of the trainees start their training in February, and there's only a very small group of us that start in August. So there was about there was about 5 of us that started in August last year, and it just made sense.
Mhm.
And it started off well, and then to be honest, I think we all just sort of took stock of how much content there was to get through, and we went from meeting up every week, whether it be in person or online. It actually fizzled out a little bit over a couple of months, and I think it's just because we just felt as if we just needed to sort of go off and all do our own
Mhm.
thing for a couple of months, learn all these topics that we wanted to learn. And then I think that our study group really came to its forefront maybe in the second 6 months in particular. And that's when we got much better at meeting up, particularly online, to like go through short answer questions and go through papers. So I think um, like the trajectory of our study group really sort of reached its peak leading up to the SAQ, and then even more so leading up to the Vibers. But there was definitely sort of this lull in our study group um, after a couple of months where I think we just all needed to just go away and like do our own thing, and it was absolutely fine. No one felt hard done by that.
It's funny. It's such a common experience where I remember all of us, in like we had 4 or 5 in our study group. We divided all the questions for RESP. We came to meet each week, and we'd done our share of the questions, but we just realized that just because someone else is teaching us something doesn't mean that we're learning it. And very quickly we realized, yeah, we need to do all the questions, even though one person's like owned a question, and even then they may not know it as good as someone else who's just a natural with physiology or pharmacology. And I think we came across the same thing. We have to do all the work and come and meet up. And then sometimes it's very ineffective when you're meeting up. It's almost like it's like PT. You're meeting up for the study group, not for the fact that you need them for anything more than turning up and making sure the work's done because you're accountable to someone. And unfortunately, in your group, hopefully, like, you've got no physiology lecturers there, right? Like, so you're all kind of just riffing off what you think you know, which is also very difficult until
Yeah.
you've got the knowledge base.
I would definitely agree with that. I think there are some things in the syllabus where as an individual, you just need to sit down and just learn it yourself. I don't think you can really necessarily rely on someone else to get you through certain parts of it. You can definitely use your study group to reinforce things, and particularly I found like listening to people explain things in a slightly different way, or if I was explaining something and then they would ask me a question and then I would think, oh, actually, I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe I don't understand this topic as well as I thought. So that was quite a good way to do things. But I definitely agree. I think there are just some things you can't rely on someone else to teach you. You've just got to sit down and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah. And you mentioned online versus in person. I think that's if anything's really changed between the time that, Stan and I set this exam and kind of the modern day exam, is the fact that you can do this stuff online, and there's definitely something lost by not having in person, everyone able to kind of coordinate chats and everything in stereo. But you don't have to waste travel time. You can literally just at the moment's notice just go, yep, let's meet up.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
I think, yeah, pros and cons to both. I think the reason why we tended to do online is just because we all sort of lived in different parts of Perth. We also had one of our members of our study group for the first 6 months of training. He was in a regional centre about 2 hours south of Perth, so it was impossible for him to meet up face to face. And then I think we did some stuff online with Viva practice, but I just think nothing quite emulates face to face with the Vivas. I think you can definitely do it online, but I think it's so much more efficient and it flows so much better face to face.
Yeah, excellent. Alex, just to round it up, is there anything that you would take away from this whole experience that you just really wish people would know about how to get through this, or how to stay sane, or anything really?
So I think I'm of the opinion that I really do think you need a year for this exam. One of our consultants, who's sort of quite involved with our training program, sort of encouraged us to take, a couple of months off when we first started just to get used to the job. I respectfully ignored that and just cracked on. And I'm really glad that I did, because I think I would have been in a world of trouble if I'd taken 3 months off. I really do think you need a year. So I think if you're maybe applying for training, or you're on training and you haven't quite started, I would encourage you to get going just lightly before you actually start training. That is just my opinion. I know some people will completely disagree with that and go, no, enjoy your life. Don't study for any much longer than you have to. But that's just me, because I take a while to get through things. So if you're in a similar boat and you take a while, I would say you definitely need a year. Definitely have a timetable, which is everyone says that. I don't. Am I allowed to mention other resources that are out there
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really don't think I can overstate how important Mac 95 is. I cannot overstate how amazing that resource is. And Frank has added so much more stuff to it over the last couple of months, particularly with the peripheral topics, which makes it so much easier. So you don't have to go hunting through textbooks for things on like gastrointestinal physiology and all the terrible peripheral topics. I can't thank him enough for Mac 95. It is just brilliant. And I think you've got to surround yourself with support people as much as possible. So if you've got a partner who, whether they are or aren't medical, you need to like have a chat with them going forward about this exam, and sort of set the tone early about how much it's going to take over your life, and that you won't be able to do the normal social things that perhaps you may be used to do. And that unfortunately things like housework and cooking and home administrative stuff is not really your priority for the next 12 months. However, saying that, you must have a life. I definitely still did things. I still went out. I still socialized here and there. Probably not so much in the last couple of months leading up to the written, but you can't shut yourself off completely for 12 months. You'll go insane.
No, that's really, really useful. And just to pick up on that point about taking and enjoying your time as a trainee. I feel like if you're motivated, it's like studying is not unenjoyable. Like if you want to study, like I remember just as soon as I got into training, I was like, oh, I just really want to get this. Like I really want to study. And like if someone told me not to study, like but I'm motivated.
I had that attitude. I was curious to get going as well. Like I was curious to start learning about a few things. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for your insights there. We might move on to Penny now. Penny, how's it going? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi. Yeah, I'm a second year trainee at in Sydney, and this is my second time that I sat. I failed my Viva in May when I first attempted, and this one luckily went a whole lot better. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what was your strategy? What was your approach? Actually, maybe the first thing I would ask you is, I think we're trying to also have this thing of normalizing the fact that some people just may need 2 or 3 attempts at this exam. There's a lot of other colleges, and we're kind of behind on, say, opthal in the sense of competitiveness and breadth and difficulty of exams. Maybe like they do the exams so large that they had to transition, I think, to monthly exams, or I could be wrong on that. And a lot of people do sit a couple of times. And that's very normal. So people don't take the hit that we take in anesthesia if we don't get through the first time. What was your experience of that, and were you prepared for it? And did it feel like a thing that, oh yeah, great, got through? This might take 2 times. Was that a thing at all?
I was pretty disappointed when I didn't pass. Mainly because I'm a mum as well. I got a little toddler at home, and I felt like I'd put quite a lot of my family time aside the first time, and I got very, very close. I literally was a few marks away from passing, so it felt pretty awful. And I just felt like I was putting my whole family through the same thing again, and that was really difficult.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not unheard of to sit it again, and there are lots of people at my hospital who sit it more than once, and so I was able to kind of know that I wasn't the odd one out. So yeah, it was just kind of, I just hopped back on the bandwagon, so to speak, and luckily got it done.
And did you know, like, obviously you're a mum, so you've got the whole family situation, and like preparing for the challenges that you might uniquely face versus just someone who didn't have to deal with things. Like, how did you manage that? How did you arrange all that?
A lot of life admin, trying to sort out where my son goes, on which days per week, and then basically teamwork with my husband, and then lots of support from family, my mum in particular, because basically when you're not at work, you're trying to be studying, and then you also have to try and spend some time with your son as well. And I found that balance really tricky to get the first time, and I think I probably got it better the second time, because I was happier if I at least put some time aside each day to spend with him. Yeah,
that's good. Did you have to limit it? Was it kind of like an hour or half an hour, or was it?
Well, the things we like doing as family is going for a walk and getting a coffee in the morning when we've all got the day off. So I prioritized that. And it was the exact opposite advice that I'd been given, which was like, study for 4 hours in the morning and then you have the rest of the day off. And it's like, well, no, we want that time in the morning that actually is special to us.
Yep.
So we worked around that and worked around nap times and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's right. Now, is there something particular about just your sleep patterns and your ability to manage that with exam stress or whatever? Like, did you have something to work through that with?
No, it was, I mean, the thing with trying to work shift work, my partner's also a shift worker, so our rosters change every week. And so trying to make any kind of routine was actually pretty difficult.
Yep.
We just had to be flexible and like work it out week by week. And the problem with kids is that you might have the grandest of plans to sit down and study for 2 hours on a given day, and then it just all falls to pieces, and you have to be okay with that. Otherwise you'll go insane.
There's a lot of accepting, isn't there?
Yeah.
How are the nuts and bolts of study for you? The time frame, the strategies?
Yeah. So I was trying to think back when I started studying. I knew I was going to take longer than the average person. So I really did 18 months before the first attempt in March. So I started studying shortly before I started my scheme job. And then, so I've really been studying for over 2 years by the time I sat my Viva. The successful one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. In terms of study groups and organizing that, how did that go?
Yeah, so there was a few people sitting from my hospital, and then I joined a study group kind of online through connections through my hospital, which worked really well this time. The problem is that you don't realize when you first sit is that if you fail your study group, a lot of them will pass, and then you lose your study group and you have to form a new one.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's a process in itself as well.
Yeah. How did you find the next study group? Like, that must have been quite tricky.
Well, one of my colleagues from my from my work. She was already a member of it, and she invited me to join, and it worked well.
Mm. Now, besides the kind of the family situation and having this ridiculously variable situation with kids that will always need your priority and your attention, what were the hardest things about the exam?
Well, life, the fact that life keeps going and the exam also has to happen around that. I wasn't in the position where I could, well, I mean, I got married just before the previous sitting, like 4 or 5 months out, which was probably not the greatest thing to do. But I think you resent your exam if you put the rest of your life on hold. So I'm glad that we didn't stop doing things that we wanted to do outside of work. I'm currently 25 weeks pregnant, so I actually got pregnant just around the time where I sat my first Viva, and then it was a bit of a shock to then have to prepare for this one. Very, very unwell from morning sickness. So,
wow.
yeah, that was the hardest part about the exam, not the actual exam itself.
Yeah. Oh God. So you've really been through just curveball after curveball with this.
Yeah.
In terms of like, the things that you felt didn't work for the first exam that you changed for your second sitting, tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, the gap between this exam and the one previous was actually a really short gap for some reason this time. So I had to really game plan how I approached that time, knowing that I had quite a few other things going on in my life as well, like illness in the family and toddlers and, all that kind of stuff. So I waited for my exam report to come back, and I could see that my SAQ score was one of those scores where like I got 48%, I think. And I was like, well, I need to go in with more buffer in the Viva, because it really puts a lot of pressure on the Viva if you aren't going in with a particularly strong SAQ score. So that was like number one goal.
Yeah.
And then number two goal was to not fall apart in the Viva, which had happened the first time.
I'm so sorry.
I had done a lot of preparation for it and actually felt reasonably ready, but unfortunately it just didn't work out on the day. And so I put a lot of work into kind of both study strategies and then kind of well-being strategies to get my headspace in the right frame of mind to do well on the Viva.
Yeah. And what were some of those strategies for?
So for study stuff, the big changes I made, I went back to the syllabus. I think there were gaps in my knowledge that the SAQs don't cover all the syllabus. So I went back and did some of those. And then I basically went through pharmacology with a fine-tooth comb, and went through the syllabus, and every single drug or drug group that was mentioned in the syllabus, I did like drill cards for the major drug groups. So I've got a big compendium of all the drugs. There's pharmacokinetics on one side and pharmacodynamics on the other side. And I did that for lots and lots of drugs, basically. And I found that also made me make use of like 20 minutes of time, little parcels of time that I get, not, stretches of a few hours.
Yes.
20 minutes, you can sit down and read about one drug and write a good kind of summary on it for yourself.
Yeah.
So I found that was really good.
There's something to be said about like maximizing those little opportunities. Like if you can, I don't know, if you're waiting for public transport or whatever, you're in traffic light, just maybe not the traffic light, sorry, but
and then also like it gives you a good reference to then if you get stuck on a Viva on a particular drug, you can just quickly go back and go, oh yeah, that's what it was, and then you're not searching through like a million different places to find the information. I also did a definition kind of dictionary, which I started in my first sitting and then I really honed in on for my second one, because I wanted to just be 100% on the ball with any of those like simple questions like what is hypoxia, what is all those kind of things. And I actually recorded all of the definitions on like voice recordings and listened to them in the car to try and make the most of that time as well.
Amazing. Now, a lot of people go through an exam, they have to resit, and they change strategy in terms of performance and coaching and everything. Do you have much advice on that?
Yeah, so that was another thing that I had to really work on. I think once you've sat a Viva that went really badly and you give yourself a really hard time about it, you revisit particular Vivas in particular, like in your head. And then as soon as you get given a viva that sounds similar in the future, you get transported back to that horrible, horrible feeling. And then you kind of freeze and you can't get information out, and it's just horrible. And so if you're sitting for the second time or the third time, you've got to try and find a way to get through that and process it. So my way was I saw a performance counsellor who was recommended to me by my hospital, and she was amazing. And she basically did like rapid eye movement therapy, going through some of those particular viva scenarios that I had gone badly.
What is that, by the way?
I think it worked. Like amazing.
What is rapid eye movement therapy?
I think they use it for like as part of a psychotherapy or psychology treatment. I'd never really heard about much of it before, but I gave it a go, and basically it's like trying to desensitize you to that particular memory so that it no longer troubles you when you think about it. And it's very weird. Like after I did it, it just seemed I could think about the scenario and not get so worked up about it. And then the other thing I did was I drilled those particular topics. So for me, it was like I had a really bad VQ viva. You were actually there. You were listening in at that vibe from my first one.
Oh, that was a Brisbane one.
Yeah, no, it was in Melbourne. You were there, and
oh, sorry, me in Melbourne. Yeah,
I was like, great, Lars listening to me.
I was trying to be like, just in the corner, head down.
So anyway, so that was one of the really bad ones. And then I'd got another terrible one on platelets in my first sitting, and literally they were like traumatic topics that I had a big block about. And then I just got my friends to be like, you have to ask me questions about these things, even though I hate answering them and I feel like I'm going to freeze. And yeah, it was like desensitizing myself to those things, and I had to know them even more than any other topic so that if I got that on the day, it wasn't going to bother me. And luckily enough, I didn't actually get asked about those topics.
You'd have probably loved it if you did.
No, I was still really happy I didn't get asked about them, but there's luck involved as well as to what questions you get.
Yeah, I definitely just did the SAQs, and on some level, I was lucky that I got the right questions that came up in most of it. So I doing the syllabus is definitely the safest way to do it, because I knew that there was gaps.
And then the other thing I did, which I think also helped, I have a friend who sent me this random link to it's an exam visualization recording of, I guess, someone who's she was talking through my colleague who was about to sit a viva, her part 2 viva, and she recorded it, and I was able to listen to it over and over again. And basically it's just visualizing how the day's going to go. This is how I'm going to respond if this happens. I know my stuff. I deserve to be here. Like I'm owning this viva type thing. And that's actually, I think, really helped as well. I went in there and I was like, this is the day I'm going to pass my viva. And I just you got to get it done, basically, which was such a different experience to the previous one, where I felt like as soon as I got a crappy question, I just kind of shrank away from it.
Hey, by the way, everyone in the audience, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat that we can ask of our guests as well. Is that recording something that's freely available, or? No,
it's not. And I don't think I'd be able to share it, unfortunately. But the basic premise of it is that you just need to. You can actually do these types of sessions with people, like some kind of counselor or psychologist, to do with mindfulness, and then they can actually, I guess, customize the mindfulness around you approaching a viva. And I would recommend that.
I did a lot of that leading up to my dad had given me this book. I think my sister had got it back in high school days, called Mind Power, and he just kept telling me to read this, and I was like, I don't want to have a bar of this hoo-ha, I don't need this. And then leading up to this exam, he gave it to me again. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this, and it was pretty much that, like visualizing how it's going to be, just feeling the emotion of success, saying words that even if you don't believe, it doesn't matter, just say the words that it's going to be okay. And I'm just thinking, hey Stan, we should just make a recording of kind of that visualization stuff, and it'll be totally something that might be useful anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to do in this space. There is, I think that where we are at the moment in terms of what we can actually achieve, I think we're just at the beginning. Because I've always said that we're anesthetists. We're not educationalists. As much as I do a lot of education, it's not my full-time job. And I think a lot of the things that I'm trying to implement are just things that I've seen around. But I really do believe that we are really just at the start of what we can actually achieve in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is a place where we just teach the way we were taught, or we try to improve the last time. But a lot of us don't have any grad certs and any kind of further education. We just follow some guiding principles. I think someone's just asked about the performance psychologist. Is that information you're able to give out, the details?
Yeah, I should be able to. I can probably give it to you guys afterwards if I just check with my psychologist that she's happy to do that. Yeah,
amazing.
But she works exclusively with doctors, which is why she was so good, I think.
Yeah, beautiful. There's another person I'll put in the chat. Patsy Tremaine is a kind of well-known performance coach who's an athlete herself, and she's definitely helped a lot of the SIMGs that we coach as well, because they go through another whole separate set of challenges as well. Now, Penny, are you able to talk about your personal challenges with pregnancy or illness? That's something that could happen to anyone. Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of alluded to it before, but I had a bit of a perfect storm in terms of crap going on outside of work that was coinciding with study. But essentially, I was very sick with morning sickness throughout, the lead up to the written exam.
Yeah.
And I basically, I just had to do what I could do and not much more. I worked out my with my supervisor of training at the hospital I was working with at that point, that I would take a little bit of annual leave each week, just one day, because I have plenty of annual leave saved up. And I was just I need to get through this exam. That's a massive priority. I can't move on with my training until I do it. And so I just kind of found some days in the term to basically take some annual leave so I could study just one day a week, basically. And that worked well. And that helped me get through that pretty difficult, quite draining period. But then in terms of other stuff happening, I've got a very close family member who's unwell at the moment with a sort of pretty progressive illness. And they were in and out of hospital in the literal month before the Viva. So there was a lot of stress involved with that. And a lot of all the normal support network that I had kind of fell apart because of that. So it was incredibly challenging. But luckily, all of my colleagues at work and stuff just were really, really supportive and could kind of understand that there was lots going on.
It's kind of useful, to have that study group or have that support network external to, your immediate family. I feel like if you're able to tell people what's going on, people just rally around you. It's like that difference of someone not saying anything and then underperforming, and then people feel kind of that, maybe a negative feeling about that. But if that person tells you, hey, I've got a lot of stuff going on, forgive me for whatever, and then people people just rally around people because they can understand and empathize with whatever stress they're going to.
I think also you've got a duty of care to your patient as well. If you're trying to pass an exam and you've got lots of stuff going on at home, and you're also putting needles in people's backs for a living, you do have to let your team members know and your supervisors know what's going on, because they can often do a lot to help you, but they won't be able to if you are pretending like everything's fine when it's actually really challenging.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. I really want to sort of focus on that I think we've evolved a lot now, especially departments and how they support trainees. And I think from what I've seen, when trainees have always come with, issues that they need time off or they need changes in timetables, generally most departments I hear are actually very supportive. And it sounds like your department did the same thing, which was an amazing, I think, not just amazing, but almost like an expectation. I think because, as you said, they don't just have duty of care to patients, but also duty of care to the people they employ as well. And I think sometimes people worry about that they may not have that support from their department. I have heard that. What I would ask is, if you didn't feel like your department was supporting you, what avenues do you think there would be? It's hard, isn't it, for a trainee? Like,
Yeah, luckily I had very, very supportive SOT and department in general. I never felt like I had any kind of issues there. But I guess you probably have to go the GP route and get some time off, through sickness, I guess. But luckily I didn't have to do that. It was all fine. But yeah.
I know Lars on the council, and I know Lars has at times said to me, if there's any issues with regards to departments not providing support, that he would be happy to sort of voice those concerns to Ansgar. And is that something, Lars, that you would be happy to take on board?
Oh, absolutely. The problem is that there's a process solution, and then there's just getting it done. And so the problem will be that whatever happens through the formal channels to make something, it won't happen urgently, and that's just the nature of big organizations. And Ansgar dealing with a hospital, and I can't even imagine how complex that is for anyone. So it feels like nothing's going to happen quickly, and the urgency of an exam is always going to be fast, like more urgent than trying to just get people together to agree on some kind of system. And I think that's really, really unfortunate, because I feel like there's certain situations where maybe big organizations should act more, maybe for the benefit of the person who's suffering, in that moment. But so I think I think exactly what you said, Stan and Penny, is like, actioning things as quick as possible with your GP, or your department, or your friends, to try and have that buffer and get yourself the leave you need or whatever. That mechanism's already in place, and I think most people don't feel like they're, we feel guilty about taking sick leave. Like, that's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, right? If you're unwell or you need help, that's what the public system is for, and that's why you're a trainee in a public system, because we all have a bad day, or we all have unfortunate events happen. But yeah, given to that point, I really think this is we're a lot better than we used to be, and we just need to keep getting better. And the way we do that is constantly knocking on the door and saying, hey, have we thought about this? Can we make this better? So very, very much, very welcome to tell me, write into me and say, hey, can you bring this up at a regional level, at a meeting level? And I can let you know what the outcome of that is. Penny, how did you you're going through all this stuff. How did you decide then that you were ready to sit versus, what, this is not going to...
Well, the baby decided that for me. The option of sitting in March was not one, because I'll have a 6-week-old baby by then. And I also remember having complete brain fog after my previous son was born. So I thought that I had a little window that I had to make the most of, and I just pushed through, basically. I did briefly consider delaying, but I had to make a call and was just like, no, I'm just going to push through. I'm almost there. I really only needed a few percent, and I just needed to get over the line with those few percent. So that's what I decided to do. But I always knew the option to delay was there. I just didn't think that was the best option for me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it seems like just such a tricky decision. I definitely know in pretty much myself and most of the people I talk to, even like a few months out, I felt like I couldn't remember enough to pass the exam. But it's that slow burn where you feel like you're not really taking in much. You can't remember what you did last week, let alone something you did last month or the months before. But then in that last month, it feels like suddenly the retention is there, and it's just this mysterious thing about compound interest, or just gradual learning of massive amounts of information, that you almost have to trust yourself that it's going to happen, again, barring things like pregnancy or illness or other things that really, really significantly get in the way.
Hey, one of the things I want to touch on is, so my daughter is 13 at the moment, very far from exams, obviously, and I was actually at a rowing seminar, because she's starting to do rowing, and one of the things they were talking about is how important sleep was in part of that whole recovery process and ability to perform at your maximal capacity. Now, sleep is obviously something that I think is a luxury for a lot of us. And even more for you now as a parent. So how did you manage those challenges?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the big things that went wrong with my first attempt. I'm a very good sleeper, and luckily my son is a reasonably good sleeper most of the time, but I have this inability to sleep before exams. It's just that night, not the night before, but just that night I can't sleep. And even though I try various different, pharmacological help and all sorts of mindfulness stuff, it just doesn't help. And I got very worked up about the fact that I was going into a viva at 4:15 in the afternoon, and I hadn't slept since the previous day. And I think that probably was a contributing factor the first time. And then I thought, well, it's actually out of my control. I've tried all these things that try and help me sleep, and they may or may not work the day before my viva, but I can't control that. What I can control is if I let that affect me or not. And I just had to make a conscious decision that if I sleep or don't sleep, I'm still going to do my best in my viva. The more I dwelled on it, the more stressed I got and the worse the sleep was. So it was just kind of one of those things I had to move on from.
And can we ask, did you sleep?
No.
No. so
I gave myself basically the safest possible mini anesthetic for my short answer, and I didn't sleep a week.
Yes.
And then I didn't go so hard for the viva one because I had a morning session exam. It was 9:15, so I was like, well, at least I only have to make it till 9:15, and then my brain can go to mush. But it was better that it wasn't in the afternoon.
And I think that's really important to know because, someone might say, oh my God, like that is like, how did you perform so well despite having no sleep at all? But I think a lot of these advice that we sort of give, it needs to be individualized, doesn't it? Like, I think what you realized was the more you stressed about sleep, the worse your performance was. And the more you sort of accepted that, look, this is how you are, and let's just not worry about it. And if it happens, it happens. Despite not having sleep, you were still able to maximize your performance. And I think that's really important.
And I have a friend at work who's been really good and really supportive through this whole process because he failed a few times as well. And he said, Penny, you're a mum. You can do anything without sleep. And I was like, yep, all right, sure.
And Alex, you said you didn't sleep at all too?
Not before the night before the SAQ. No, it was awful, and I had exactly the same experience. I was lying in bed, awake, going, "Oh my God, I need to go to sleep. I need to get to sleep," which just made me more stressed. And then I didn't sleep, and then just this awful spiral. And then we start the exam very early in. I'm not sure if it's the same, but
no, you can start early in Perth.
Yeah, our reading time for the MCQ starts at 10 to 8 in the morning, so they want us there at like 7:15 to register.
Yes.
And one of my friends in my study group often says to me when we talk about the SAQ, she says, "I was so worried for you because you turned up looking like an absolute zombie." Like she was like, you looked awful. I still don't know how I got through it. Like, it's just, I can't believe it. Like, I was so exhausted.
How about the Viva? What happened with the Viva and sleep then?
I slept so much better. Yeah, I slept so much better before the Viva. So I went for a run the day before, just tried to exhaust myself, didn't drink any alcohol the night before, didn't have like any caffeine in the afternoon.
Yes.
And I felt much more comfortable going into the Viva than I did the SAQ. Much more comfortable.
Yes. And it's that whole mindset, isn't it? I think the SAQ and the MCQ exam, it's a whole lot of uncertainty in terms of whether you're ready or not. Whereas I agree with you, like the Viva, you sort of get that feeling as you go through the whole process, hey, I'm doing well, I'm actually going to be okay. And I think that gives you that comfort, confidence to actually have that good rest. But I remember when I went through my exam, like I'd only probably get like a couple of hours of sleep, maybe 2 or 3. I don't know for yourself, La. How did you go?
I sleep like a baby. I'm sorry, that's the wrong analogy. I sleep well. I got to say, I always sleep well, except before an exam, but I still get a good 6 hours. Like I'm just wired up until midnight and I sleep. But I think I think I'm really good with all the sleep hygiene stuff just throughout.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely won't have coffee after a certain time. I definitely don't drink alcohol at all during this time. And just from traveling, I don't know if you had that experience where you travel, you come back and you're just totally off the time scale. And, when I wake up at 4 in the morning, I'm just totally wide awake. I learned not to get stressed about it. I just watch something on YouTube that's funny, and then I just and then I just relax, and I eventually go to sleep, and I'm okay with it. But I think it's also trusting that training has got me to a point where I can operate, without 24 hours sleep, and the proof is it's been done before. That I know I'm okay for a period of time, and we've probably been through that through training and all the other medical stuff that we've had to do that we've got here because we can do it. So I think I just believe that it'll be okay.
Yeah. Hey, Penny, I want to make just want you to comment, because you're probably the only one here at the moment who's experienced Melbourne, and then for the first time, the primary vival was held in Brisbane, and the differences between the Melbourne and the Brisbane sitting. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was really nice to go to Brisbane because my husband's family are all based there. So I could stay at their house, and we settled in for a few days beforehand and tried to get out of that sort of I'm here for an exam type mindset. And I didn't have to stay in a hotel, which is notoriously bad for me for trying to get to sleep. So I didn't have that connotation of flying in the night before, staying in a hotel across from the exam center and having to look at it from the window. And that was actually really good. I would advise against that if you have trouble sleeping. And so, yeah, I was able to have a completely different sort of mindset for this one, which worked well. The actual exam was very similar in terms of layout. It was in the W Hotel, which is a really nice hotel in Brisbane.
Wow, that's expensive.
Yeah, it's like a 5-star hotel. It was lovely, but for me it was different because I had to do quarantine before the exam, which I didn't have to do the previous time, and I found that really difficult as well because you put your bag in the head and they take your phone and stuff away from you, and then you get corralled into this kind of box for an hour. And it was at that point that we were told that the exam results weren't going to be released until the following day, because I was a Tuesday morning. And I found that hard because a few people kind of didn't read the room necessarily all that well, perhaps, and they started talking about tubular glomerular feedback and all this stuff, and I'd just literally taken my earpods out with my mindfulness stuff, and I was in the zone ready to do my exam, and I was feeling good. And then and then you have to take your phone away and your earpods away and stuff, and then there's someone trying to chatter away about how the tubular glomerular feedback works, and I'm just like, oh, don't talk, I'm just in the zone, don't let me get out of the zone. And so you literally couldn't leave the room unless you wanted to go to the toilet, and so I went to the toilet twice because I was like, I've got to leave. But there were other people that were just kind of like me, just sitting in their own space and trying to stay in the zone. But I found that really challenging. I think doing the quarantine after the exam would be much easier, but you don't get a say in that, unfortunately.
Alex, did you have a similar experience? I know that athletes, when you see them come on, and I'm a big sports person, they have the earphones on and they're trying to get themselves into the zone, focus. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is that something that you did, Alex, or your preparation going ahead?
Certainly wouldn't consider myself an athlete. No, I'm not really into that. I'm not really into the pump up music. I stayed a 5-minute walk away from the W Hotel, mainly because I thought that the nightly rate at the W was pretty high. And also I didn't really want to go down and have breakfast and see examiners leading up to and after the event, particularly because I knew at least 2 to 3 examiners who were there. But yeah, I walked up to the registration area, and it was just like a general sitting area. And I just sat completely separate to everyone else. I was like, with all due respect, I'm not interested in speaking to anyone. I don't really want to make new friends. I just want to get in and get this over and done with. So I sat separately, and then I had to quarantine beforehand, which is just awful. Penny described it really well. They put you into this room. I sat next to someone in a row of chairs, but just eyes forward, didn't want to speak to anyone. Luckily, no one was talking about the content leading up to it. Penny, I would have lost it. Like, I would have absolutely have hated that. I think that is definitely someone who's failing to read the room. That's terrible. So I think I was in that room for about 40 minutes. It's awful. Or you just stare at the wall. I purposefully, I didn't think about questions. I didn't think about content. I thought about all the things that I'm going to do after this process is over.
And then, I don't know whether you had to experience this, Penny, but certainly, let's talk about this. After your exam, you didn't get your results because there was a glitch in the system.
Yeah. We had to
did you
wait
experience
a whole
that too?
day. Well,
Yeah.
But luckily, we knew about it before we sat, whereas the Monday people were waiting for an email that didn't arrive. That would have been a lot worse. Yeah.
And you were on Monday, Alex?
Yeah, so I had that. Yeah. So we were told. So the chief examiner came into our quarantine room and was really lovely and wished us well, and reminded us that we all deserve to be there, and had actually said something really nice. And then he said, you'll get your results later today. The email will come out well before the celebration drink, so you can look at your email in private. You can make a decision about whether or not you want to come to the drinks. And we'd heard from obviously previous trainees saying, it's really good. You get your result later that day. You don't have to wait weeks and all this time for it. So you find out straight away, which is great.
Mm.
And then we were sitting in a really nice bar in Brisbane at the top of the casino, overlooking Brisbane, just constantly refreshing our phones from about 5:30. That 5:30 turned to 6:15, 20 past 6, and the drinks were at 6:30, and we were sort of expecting, like, what's going on here? Then it got to 6:30 and we thought, maybe we'll just wander over to the drinks. Who knows? Maybe something's happened. And as we were walking over, we got this email saying, it's likely going to be tomorrow. We were very frustrated, actually.
Yeah.
Like, we understood, that, it wasn't purposeful, and I'm sure that they were trying to fix it and do everything. And it was really frustrating.
I was having a chat to an examiner because one of our colleagues, Julie, I'm sure she don't mind mentioning, is an examiner at our hospital line. She was actually up in Brisbane. So I was having a chat to her about it. And she certainly talked about the pressures in terms of trying to get that results out. And, the system that they've got, obviously it's, showed to be not sort of perfect. But I think, it's that pressure of making sure that I think you get the results out correctly versus not doing it right. So
that's what So when we went to the drinks, David Fahey came around to every single trainee and personally apologized and said, I'm really sorry about this, but we need to, ensure that we do this correctly and so on. So that was really nice that he did that. He took the time and the effort to come around and speak to every single trainee that was there and explain the situation. And I mean, it is what it is.
I think they have to hand in every result live. I don't know whether when you were seeing it when you were doing the vivas at the start, but I think they have to do it all by paper. So they have to hand it to someone. Yeah. Someone has to type it all in, and then after that, it all gets collated. Is that from your experience what you saw last?
It's definitely on paper, which is still fine. I mean, we heard. I think it was at the physician college, the College of Psychiatry. They had some major, this is a minor hiccup compared to having to stop the exam and saying, oh, by the way, we'll let you know when we're ready. I think just generally speaking, I'm just so glad that our exam process hasn't stuffed up majorly. But also you pay a lot of money. You'd hope that something like that is already sorted out and there's multiple points of failure.
This is a joke. But it's all going to the W Hotel, obviously. So, all right.
Sam, is that a joke? I don't know. You're laughing. Yeah. Are those tears in your eyes? Or
I wasn't at the W Hotel, but you gotta, it's gotta go somewhere. Now, I think Lars is going to summarize. But before I go, I just want to say that, look, the key messages that I got was that if you're sitting for the first time, 12 months is very much like MAC. MAC is, the number where 50% of the patients are going to have a result. And I think very much so, like 12 months is going to be like what 50% of the trainees are going to have a result in. And there's obviously going to be standard deviations on either side. You're going to hear stories of people who are sitting, 6 months, 3 months. And you're going to hear trainees who obviously take a little bit longer, 18, 24 months. But I think 12 months is the acceptable standard, and allows you also all those things you talked about, Alex, in terms of having to pivot because of, due to work or some changes in circumstance. I think it gives you that buffer and sort of that study group, and allows you to actually make those changes without that time pressure. So I think that's really good. And then Penny, what I got from your talk was, if you need to sit again, I think it's really important to not put your life on hold. Otherwise you get really resentful about this exam. And I totally agree. And I also think that you need to change. You do need to change your approach. So, for yourself, you said you focused on the syllabus, whereas the first one you focused on the SAQs. And I think vice versa. If the first sitting you focused on the syllabus, change it around, focus on the SAQs. I think it is important to sort of change things around, just making sure that you feel like you're progressing. And I think also the requirement of professional help in terms of performance counselor, a life coach, I think it is underestimated. Like, schools nowadays, they provide it as a given. And I think, for us professionals, I just think it is an invaluable resource to just unlock your full potential. So thank you so much. Lard, any comments on what you got out of this?
Alex, go for it.
I just wanted to say to Penny, absolutely hats off to you and congratulations for getting through with children or a child. I couldn't think of how difficult it must have been. For someone, I don't have kids, so I don't feel as if I can ever complain about this entire experience speaking to someone like you. And if I ever do, feel free to send me a virtual punch in the face. We had someone in our study group who had 2 small children, and when we were meeting online and so on, her kids would sometimes sneak into the study and beg her to come and play and go outside, and she would have to say no. And myself and my other friends in the study group who didn't have kids, we just thought, this process is all so terrible as it is. We couldn't even fathom what it must be like to do it with kids. So congratulations. You must be so happy that all of this is over. You must be so proud of yourself.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. And I think it's going to become more and more common because there's lots of women in anaesthesia, and there's also lots of postgraduate medical graduates. So life happens all at the same time as training, and it's going to be normal. So we have to make it normal. Yeah.
And also, I just remember so many of, especially in this context, my female colleagues over the years were the ones that are fighting for certain rights. If they're on maternity leave, why should they have to pay the full college fees? And I remember one of my colleagues really fighting for that, and now that's gone through. And as you guys get into leadership positions and go through, I know you will, just that's what we need, just constantly people just knocking on the door and saying, hey, have we thought about making this fairer or making this more reasonable? And I think you guys will be well placed to do that as well. If no one has any more questions, thank you so much for joining us. It's just such a privilege to hear your stories, and I think everyone just gets a lot out of it. I just think it's really useful that people get to hear stories of everyone from various parts of Australia, how they passed, what was challenging. That things will happen, tragedies will happen, difficult conditions will occur, and everyone's got their personal journeys and challenges. And it really, really, really does help to know the way you guys have dealt with things, because I've got to say, when I was doing it, a lot of these things were secret. People had problems, but no one talked about it, and it was a lot more things were probably shameful, or people felt really off about certain things that are just totally normal and just part of the human condition. So thanks very much for sharing. This is Anesthesia Coffee Break. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to this. And we'll see you for the next episode. See you guys.
Thank you.
Now, what's new with ABCs of Anesthesia is that we're forming a whole bunch of very comprehensive courses for every stage of your anesthetic journey, from medical student to procedural skills, from foundations in anesthesia, as well as really important exam lectures and clinical anesthesia courses as well.